I want to welcome you to today's web seminar on familial DNA searching. We have some folks who are still signing on. While they are signing on, we'll go ahead and just go over a few housekeeping issues here. Today's audio is coming over your computer. If you can't hear us right now, you might want to try to turn on your speakers. And if you can't hear us, you probably can't hear me telling you this anyway, but turn on your speakers or turn up your sound. And if you have any technical issues during the webinar, you can ask me through the question and answer tool. I might be able to help you get sound, or you can also call WebEx technical support at 866-229-3239. I wanted to let everybody know that everyone who called into the webinar today, everyone is muted upon entry to the call, and so we won't be taking questions verbally, but we do want your questions. You'll be able to ask anytime during the webinar, and we will get to questions at the end of the presentation today. You ask a question using the question and answer toolbar on the WebEx system. Some of you may see it on the right side of your screen. You have several panels on the right side. You might have to maximize it by clicking on the little arrow to the left of the panel where it says Q&A. And some of you may see it as a floating toolbar on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and there you click on the question mark icon, and that'll open the toolbar. You can type your question in the little box and hit the send button, and your questions are not seen by anybody else but just the panelists. We'll do our best to answer all your questions today. It just depends on how long our presentation takes, but if we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up with you by email. You can also send me an email afterwards if we don't get to an issue that you want to find some answers about. Okay, this is actually a little visual for you about how the different question and answer icons look. I want to talk for a second about the National Center for Victims of Crime before we turn over to Mr. Morrissey. The National Center for Victims of Crime is a nonprofit organization that advocates for victims' rights and is a trusted source of information on victims' issues. Our mission is to forge a national commitment to help victims of crime rebuild their lives. And our work focuses on training and technical assistance for those who work with victims of crime, and we also advocate at the state and federal level for victims' rights and funding for victims' services and various protections for victims of crime. Since about 2002, the National Center has been working on increasing the understanding of forensic DNA and DNA technology, because we know that if we maximize the use of DNA and DNA technology, that we can solve more crime and even prevent more crime. And so along those lines, we're very pleased to bring you this webinar today on familial DNA searching with the support of Life Technologies. Life Technologies is a DNA technology company that has supported our work over the years to increase knowledge about DNA technology and how DNA can be used in criminal investigations. And with their support, we have conducted many webinars, in-person trainings. We've developed materials about forensic DNA for victims and law enforcement professionals who work with victims. And all of those materials and information about trainings are available on our our website. And we also record and archive our webinars. If you've missed any of them, you can find them on our website as well. And stay tuned for an upcoming webinar on November 9th on collection of DNA from persons who have been arrested for crimes. I wanted to get to the web page. I think I had it. There it is. The web address, this is for our online DNA Resource Center, and all the materials and announcements are on this web page. So go ahead and check that out, and we post the links to the recorded webinars and to upcoming webinars here at this page. Okay, and this is my contact information. If you want to email with me with any questions or tell us how we're doing in our work on maximizing the potential of forensic DNA or anything related to forensic DNA, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, and we are very thrilled to have District Attorney Mitch Morrissey with us today. Mr. Morrissey is the District Attorney of Denver, Colorado, and is internationally recognized for his expertise in DNA technology and criminal prosecutions. He introduced the first DNA evidence used in a criminal trial in Denver and has worked extensively on the Denver Cold Case Project, which more than 4,200 unsolved sexual assaults and murders have been reviewed in the hopes of solving those cases with DNA. With the Denver Police Department, he also runs a program to use DNA to solve burglary cases and other property crimes. Mr. Morrissey is one of the lead proponents of using familial DNA database searches in the United States and directs the Denver DNA Human Identification Research Project, which is studying the use of familial DNA search in criminal investigations in Denver and Colorado. So I want to thank Mitch so much for being with us today, and I know his schedule is extremely hectic, so I very much appreciate your time, and I will give the floor to you now.
Thanks, Elsa. If this presentation isn't appearing or isn't moving, let me know.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
Looks like it's going. I'll see if people send me any messages to say it's not working. I haven't seen anything yet, but it looks like it's going.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to welcome everybody, and I'm talking about familial DNA searches, and the goal here is to kind of talk about the history of it, what it is, and also those places interested in doing familial searching, some of the policy matters and things that go along with this new technology. Why is DNA important in general? DNA is found in most violent crimes, murders, sexual assaults, and sexual assaults on children. And a statistic that most of the cases that where DNA is significant, 90% of the victims in those cases are women. The 10% that are left, the majority are children, about 9.5%. That statistic's changed a little bit now that we've started using DNA to solve property crimes, but that's a statistic that goes back almost as long as we've been using DNA to solve cases. And obviously, exonerating innocent people is extremely an important part of DNA evidence. So why is familial searching important? It saves time, saves money, and it promotes justice and prevents crime. Why is it important to victims of crime? It provides them with hope, and I'll talk about that a little, provides them with answers if there is a familial hit, and it, again, promotes justice. We all know, those of us that work with victims, these are the 5 effects that we see from victimization. And of course, when we're talking about homicides and sexual assaults, obviously there's physical, emotional, social, and spiritual aspects to those types of victimizations. This is Mr. Franklin in the background, and probably the most significant familial search to date in the United States.
Police in Los Angeles today announced the arrest of a retired auto mechanic they say haunted the city for a quarter century, a serial killer who allegedly preyed on the weak. As Neil Karlinski reports, they may have his son's DNA to thank.
The killings took place in a cluster around the same South LA neighborhood. All of them matched to the same .25 caliber handgun. All of them matched to the same DNA, generally saliva taken from the victim's breasts. Most of the killings occurred before 1990, and police wouldn't have had a clue they had a serial killer on their hands, not for the fact that he started killing again. After a 14-year break, the Grim Sleeper awoke to kill 3 women in 2002, 2003, and 2007. Here.
We have 12 individuals starting in 1985. Our 3rd victim, Thomas Steele, was the only male involved in this.
What's common to the victims?
They're all from the same general area of the city in South Los Angeles. I don't think I would label them all as prostitutes per se, but they certainly have troubled lifestyles. They're broken people, and they're easy targets.
The arrest was a long shot, even by cold case detective standards. Because the suspect was clean, he had no DNA to match as part of a massive million-sample sweep of the state's felon database. Enter a technique called familial DNA. When the suspect's son was reportedly arrested in another matter and swabbed for DNA, detectives were blindsided by what they say was a partial match linking back 2 decades to the Grim Sleeper case. That link from a son to his father broke the case.
It's the tenacity of these detectives in conjunction with the assistance of technology, i.e. DNA, that got them to the end of this road.
So basically it's a situation where you have DNA at the crime scene, you've run that profile in the National DNA Database, and there's no match. These are major cases primarily where it's important because your law enforcement agency is continuing to run down leads. The software, the Familial Search software, can give you a lead towards a family member and help you solve the case. Familial searching first started in the UK, and there's some examples here.
Morrissey thinks the U.S. should do what the Brits are doing. They have developed a technique to scour their DNA database, deliberately searching for partial matches that might indicate a relative. It's called familial searching. And the city of Rotherham used it to try and catch a criminal who had eluded police for 20 years. Back in the 1980s, he was called the shoe rapist because of the pattern of his attacks.
It was a lone female walking home. Invariably, they were wearing stiletto shoes. They were tied up using stockings, and their shoes were always stolen.
Detective Sue Hickman was given a list of 43 people in the area who could have been related to the rapist. The third door she knocked on belonged to June Lloyd, whose DNA was in the database because of a DUI arrest.
What did you say to her? We're running a cold case investigation, and there are some similarities between your DNA and the offender's DNA. Do you mind telling me, have you got any brothers? And she said, yes. She said, I've got a brother, but it won't be my brother, he's a businessman.
Her brother James was a manager at this print shop. Married with children, he had no criminal record. But when his sister called and told him about Hickman's visit, he became suicidal, and his family called the police. Underneath a trap door at his office, police discovered this.
Oh, my goodness.
More than 100 women's shoes.
This is stunning.
All worn, all different sizes, all stiletto heels. DNA testing confirmed James Lloyd was the shoe rapist.
You visited 3 people and solved the crime
in 8 hours.
In 8 hours, yeah. You think this should be a national policy, familial searching?
Absolutely. There should be a familial searching policy that is constitutional and legal in the United States.
So this is just some examples of the success rate that they have in the UK. They've looked at 210 specific serious crime investigations. 40 out of the 210, about 19% of the time, the list that they do the testing on, there is a relative to the individual that left the DNA at the crime scene. This is a picture of almost every single one of them that they've captured. Joseph Capon was the first. He murdered 3 girls in the 1980s. That was the first successful familial search that I know of. Mr. Capon had to be exhumed. He had passed away from cancer. They exhumed him after getting a familial match to his son, and they were able to get a familial search. So as you can see, we're talking about mostly males. Most of these individuals are murderers or rapists. You can see there's 2 women, Ms. Davies and Ms. Bond. They were investigated for abandoning babies, and the familial searching was able to find a relative in the database and get back to the mother of these children that were abandoned. They've caught 22 perpetrators through this investigative technique. They've solved 14 murders, 48 rapes, the 3 child abandonments I talked about. One of the 2 women abandoned 2 different children about 18 months apart. And then they've had exonerations that they have now gone back and identified the true individual using familial searching. Familial searching also takes place in New Zealand. New Zealand's had 3 successes. An individual that they were able to tie to 2 rapes, the rape of a 27-year-old and a 90-year-old woman, and then they were able to solve a murder. Mr. Reekers was connected when his sister went into their national database, and they got a familial match. and through conventional investigations were able to tie him to the murder. So familial searching in the United States, I'm going to talk to you where we basically, along with California, who was paralleling what we were doing as far as familial searching goes, we were lucky enough to go to the UK in 2006, obtain both their familial search protocol, but also to study their program. We came back and tried to convince the FBI to research familial searching in the U.S., and they weren't interested in doing that. We were in the middle of conversations with California about changing their policy to allow familial searching, and were able to convince then Attorney General Jerry Brown that he needed to change that policy. Once that was changed, they started the process of putting together a familial search policy in California at the same time we were doing our research in Denver. So we first used the familial search software to run it against our small database in Denver, and we got 5 separate instances where we had a 90% chance that the 2 individuals were related. When they're males, we use the Y-Str test. We test the profile from the crime scene as well as the profile from the database to see if they have the same Y-Str type. If they do, then we proceed with the investigation, give the name to the investigators. If we don't, that's the end of the lead, because if they don't have the same Y-Str type, then they aren't related males, either through their father or brothers. That same Y-Strs has to be there. So in those 5, and this is an example of one of the 5, we got a 90% chance that we had a father-son relationship in our small database from an unsolved burglary. The father had been put in the database from 2002 for an aggravated assault. You can see a photograph of him, although you can't see his name. We ran the Y-Str testing once we got the likelihood ratio of 90%, and we had the same Y chromosome. So this is how the conventional investigation proceeded. We built a family tree. You can see all of his offspring. We're not interested in the women. The first son was in custody at the time of our burglary. The second son was in custody also at the time of our burglary, which means that they both had pretty good alibis and could not have been our burglar. The third son was in the penitentiary at the time of our search, but not at the time of our burglary. So we called the penitentiary, asked if he had been put in the national database, our state database. They indicated not yet. They moved him up the list, and within 2 weeks we had a CODIS hit to this particular DNA that was left in the burglary scene. So we showed that it worked. We decided to develop our own software. Cost us $50,000, which included developing the software and buying a dedicated laptop to do this work. Then we moved forward as far as our research went to try to get the state of Colorado to let us do familial searching at the state level. First, we contacted the Department of Public Safety and the Attorney General, developed a familial search policy, and worked with them to create it. We presented the policy to the governor and to the leaders of our legislature. We didn't want anybody to not know what it was that we were doing, and so we went to the leaders of our state, and I spoke to the governor personally twice, and then we met with the leaders of the legislature to explain how we were going to be using the Colorado DNA database. These are some of the details both on our policy and how it works. 85% of CODIS hits are obtained within the state, so it's important that we do this at the state level. Certainly in the eastern part of the United States, where the states are smaller, closer together, easier for perpetrators to move from one state to the other, it would work on a more regional basis. But out in the west, like Colorado, Colorado's a perfect example. Our perpetrators stay in Colorado, primarily in Denver. 26% of the violent crimes in Colorado happen in my jurisdiction here in Denver, and those people have to go a long way just to get out of the state, let alone to go to another city somewhere else. We determined, based on our DNA statute, that no statute change was necessary. We developed our policy, keeping in mind privacy concerns at the same time trying to use this important tool to solve violent offenses and prevent future victimization. It applies to both the arrestee side of our database as well as the convicted felons. We never contact the family unless there's exigent circumstances. We do public searches of public databases, law enforcement databases to create the family tree, and when we go out to contact the individual involved, we either are armed with a warrant, a probable cause warrant, or a court order that allows us to take DNA, but we do not reach out to family members. The last thing in the world we want to do is tip off the individual that we're looking at. These are just basic guidelines in our policy. There has to be a request from the sheriff, chief of police, or the DA from the jurisdiction that wants the familial search done. It has to be a case that presents a public safety concern. All leads have to be exhausted. We use only full DNA profiles, 13 loci in our state. There must be a Y-Str testing done, if possible, if we're talking about males. Only after that Y-Str testing is done and there's a match on the Y profile do we release the name, date of birth of the individual. There has to be, the agency requesting it has to agree to do a follow-up investigation. If we go to all this trouble and they're not willing to follow up, then we're wasting resources. So there's an agreement there in our policy. They must agree to do that. And then the lead investigator must be trained in how to conduct a conventional familial search investigation, a follow-up investigation. So far in our research project, we have run one familial search, all our forensic unknowns, which was about 2,000, against our 80,000 person profile database. And we used our own software to do that. 10 separate occasions we successfully have identified the individual who left the DNA at the crime scene. We have run a second familial search with all the forensic unknowns against our database, which is almost doubled in size, and we are running the Y-Strs on those cases to see where we are. So we're in the middle of our second run on this. We had our Colorado policy being reviewed by the Global Justice Information Sharing Initiative for privacy and information quality, and our hope is that this group from the Department of Justice will then set out a model policy for other states to follow when they create a familial search policy. A lot of people ask us about the cost, and let me go back to that. Our cost is about $2,500 per search. That's assuming 20 Y-Str follow-up tests. Pursuant to our policy, we do the actual follow-up tests in Denver and not the state lab. If you had as many as 200 candidates, then it would cost you about $7,000 per search. And of course, this does not take into account the cost of the follow-up investigation once there is a familial match. Just a little bit, Y-Str testing, obviously, you get your Y chromosome. Males have them only through your father. So brothers from the same father are going to have a Y-Str that's the same type. Grandsons that come through the paternal line are going to share the same Y-Str type. It's important that you use this follow-up test to eliminate people or any false positives that you can. You can use mitochondrial DNA if there's a woman involved. I know Virginia uses mitostrips to sort out any female, so if your crime scene profile is from a female or if it matches to a female in the database, it's another way to do that. We don't have the ability to do that in Denver or in the state of Colorado, so when we have those kind of matches, we just go ahead and do the conventional investigation. This is the first conviction based on a familial search in the United States. It was in Denver, and it was part of our research project, and it turned out to be a car break-in. The individual we were looking for broke into 60 cars in one parking lot, cut himself in the last two, and bled, leaving his blood inside two cars. We did a familial search. We got a 90% likelihood that an individual who was a car thief, who's in this slide, was the brother of who we were looking for. We did Y-Str testing, got a match. Conventional investigation. These were their parents. We found the brother. His blood we were able to obtain through a court order, and we got a match to both cars, the blood in the cars, and charged him, and he pled guilty to breaking into the two cars. So that's the first conviction in the United States. You saw about the Grim Sleeper and Lonnie Franklin. California has had their second success, a woman that was raped at knife point in Santa Cruz in 2004. A familial search led to his father, who was in the California database, and investigators obtained a sample from him that matched the sample they got from the rape. We've reached out to other jurisdictions across the United States, offering our software for free. Wisconsin is currently in the process of accepting our software. They're having some IT issues, but otherwise everything has been done. We've offered it to 27 different states at this time. We offer the technology or the software for free, so there's no cost to the lab to purchase the software. Virginia was the first state to take us up on it, and this is one of the cases why.
Police believe they have found missing 20-year-old Virginia Tech student Morgan Harrington, but it's not the outcome they were hoping for.
We're fairly confident this time that the remains are those of Morgan Dana Harrington.
Harrington disappeared last October at a Metallica concert on UVA's campus. On Tuesday, skeletal remains were found on Anchorage Farm. It's about 6 miles away from the John Paul Jones Arena where Harrington was last seen.
And the reason Harrington is important is that about 5 years before there was a rape, and a violent rape, and the individual that it was shown on the screen here, the composite drawing, DNA from her clothing matched the rape kit 5 years before, so we know that this is a serial offender working out in Virginia. At the time we went out and offered our software to Virginia, we spoke to a legislative committee, and at the time, the East Coast rapist, who had been active in Virginia and about 4 or 5 other states, was still out there. They have since caught him, but that was one of the other cases that they were interested in using familial searching on, because they had DNA profiles from him, but he just was not in any of the databases out there, including the Virginia database. They accepted our software on December 27, 2010. Less than 3 months, they validated it for working on cases, and also came up with a policy, a state policy, to allow them to do it. All of these policies, all of New Zealand, the UK, California, Virginia, and the Colorado policy are on my website at denverda.org. Go to the DNA section of that website, go to the familial search section, and you will find all the policies out there that are published. We have offered it to Illinois, and this is primarily the reason we've done that. This case is still pending out, or still unsolved out there.
Police say a gunman shot and killed 5 women in a robbery at a women's clothing store late Saturday morning. The incident happened at This Lane Bryant, southwest of Chicago. The store is at a strip mall called the Brookside Marketplace. Authorities say the store was open when the incident happened. When police arrived, they found the victims in the back of the store.
So this is a case where in 2008 where a man went in, shot 6 women, execution style, killing 5 of them, left a DNA profile that does not match anybody in the national database. We spoke to the investigators about this, made our offer to the Illinois State Lab for our software for free, and the investigators are very interested in running a familial search both in Illinois and Indiana, because they are halfway between Indiana and Illinois, about the same, about 25 miles apart, 28 miles apart, and they get a lot of crime that comes out of Gary, Indiana, and also Chicago. So they are interested in a familial search being run in both those states. Obviously, exonerations are important, like I said, and it was the Innocence Project at Northwestern University's Law School that had us out to do our presentation to the people in Illinois as far as their state database people and their Attorney General.
To confirm it was bin Laden, the government used DNA from his sister. To finally track down the Grim Sleeper serial killer in California, police turned to his son's DNA. It's called familial DNA testing. When investigators have a DNA profile they can't identify, the special testing allows them to use the genetic blueprint to search the existing database for relatives of that profile, which could eventually lead to a suspect. Attorney Judy Royal and the Center on Wrongful Convictions are lobbying Illinois leaders to start using the testing.
This technique is only used when other investigative leads have been exhausted.
As Royal believes is the case with her client, convicted killer Juan Rivera. Back in 1992, at age 19, he was charged with raping, stabbing, and murdering 11-year-old Holly Staker in Waukegan.
If you do have any prayers.
Rivera is serving a life sentence. After a series of appeals, Rivera has now 3 times gone to trial for the Staker murder, and 3 times the jury has found him guilty. This is his first interview from prison.
I'm not the person that committed this murder.
Rivera has spent most of the last 20 years behind bars at Stateville in Joliet. Although he admits initially lying to investigators about where he was the night of the crime, he maintains the confession he signed after a 4-day police interrogation was coerced.
I lost consciousness. I blacked out, so I don't remember anything that occurred.
During the last trial in 2009, advancements in technology allowed DNA that was recovered from Holly Staker's body to be tested. The profile did not match Juan Rivera, nor did it match anyone else in the national database.
I refuse to plead guilty to something I did not commit. I'd rather die in prison as an innocent man.
Rivera's attorney believes familial testing on the recovered DNA could create a new lead.
We have a very clear, complete profile. We just don't have the name of the individual whose DNA that is.
Only California, Colorado, and Virginia use familial DNA testing right now.
So you have a situation where a man got convicted in spite of the fact the jury was told that DNA from the rape kit of an 11-year-old girl did not match him. Obviously, that DNA has been run in the national DNA database, and it doesn't match anyone there. So potentially, if you got a familial match in Illinois, you may very well be able to get to whoever left this DNA in this little girl, and that may give you a lead towards, or at least somebody to ask how that got there and what was going on. Obviously, his lawyers think that that would exonerate Mr. Rivera. But I think what's important about this technology is that it is an investigative lead and nothing else. It's not guilt by association. It is an investigative lead that gives you somebody to investigate and go talk to in these very serious cases. We've reached out to Florida. Florida has an active rapist in one community, and we've reached out to their state lab, but also we've reached out to the Daytona Beach Police Department, the state's attorney there, their attorney general, to formulate a policy, and their state's attorneys are writing a policy, and it's my understanding that their state lab is looking into different familial search software to try to determine which would be the best to use. So there is some criticism of familial searching, obviously around issues of privacy. We call it unwarranted criticism. And when you really look at the information about how this works, you'll find that there is no constitutional privacy issue here. Our Fourth Amendment rights are our privacy rights in the criminal setting. And remember that we are taking DNA from a crime scene which has been abandoned by the individual that committed the crime. That abandoned DNA, the person has no reasonable expectation of privacy in that DNA. I've never heard a defense attorney argue that there's an expectation of privacy in DNA that we find in a rape kit, in blood that we find at a crime scene. That is abandoned property as far as the DNA goes. And so the individual that left it there has no reasonable expectation of privacy and therefore has no standing to challenge a familial search. The only court that's addressed familial searching at all is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in U.S. versus Poole, and they were asked about it in terms of the California DNA database or the federal DNA database and taking DNA from arrestees. And the argument was that, well, they can do this, so that makes the arrestee statute unconstitutional. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had no problem with familial searching if you read this quote. And they said it was analogous to witnesses viewing photographs that look similar to the suspect. Then as far as the individual in the database goes, what are their grounds to challenge a familial search? Hopefully, all the people in the database are there legally. They've been convicted or they've been arrested for those qualifying offenses that get them into the state database legally. We are searching an unknown profile against their profile, knowing full well that they're not the person that committed the crime. We're never going to charge them with a crime. So in the criminal case itself, they wouldn't have standing to raise a Fourth Amendment issue. They're not the defendant in the case, so again, they have no standing there. There's also been issues raised about ethnic and race issues when it comes to familial searching. And remember, our DNA database in the United States does accurately reflect the racial breakdown of those who have been arrested or convicted or imprisoned. The DNA routinely identifies the database, those hits, routinely identify offenders proportionally to the breakdown racially of the people that are in our database. I think it's important to realize, though, many of these offenders, many of the victims of the offenses that we're talking about, rapes and murders, are people of color. If you look at the statistics from 2005, while African Americans were 13% of the U.S. population that year, they accounted for nearly half of the homicide victims, 49%. And then when you look at sexual assaults between 2001 and 2005, the average victimization rate of African American women in sexual assaults was double that of whites and Hispanics. So this is a technology that helps us solve rapes and murders, and oftentimes those victims are people of color. And to create an artificial constraint against using the database in this manner would result in a violation of those victims' rights to have their cases resolved. And this is just a couple of clips.
That, you know, that they have captured this guy, and they say they linked it through DNA, so we definitely got the right guy. So it's definitely going to bring my family some closure.
In September of 1988, 18-year-old Alicia Monique Alexander went to the liquor store near her house and never came home. Her body, murdered and raped, was found a few days later. Just one in a series of murders to haunt Los Angeles and eventually be linked to a serial killer called the Grim Sleeper.
I was just wondering when. I hope I live long enough to see him get caught. So I'm just happy that that day is here.
Diana Ware's daughter Barbara was among the victims. She was murdered in 1987, her body discovered in a van in an alleyway.
And we just had to come down here to see the area. We were just coming back from police headquarters.
Obviously, this was important to these victims of the Grim Sleeper to find out who killed their sisters, their daughters. And it really, I think it speaks to the fact that these are hard cases to solve. This case went unsolved for 25 years. He was the most active serial murderer west of the Mississippi during that period of time. And it really doesn't matter what neighborhood it's taking place in, what the color or the race of the individuals that are victims of these kind of offenders. What's important is that familial searching was an important investigative tool in this case to lead to Mr. Franklin, and hopefully Mr. Franklin will be held accountable for what he did in the Los Angeles courts. So what's next with familial searching? DNA search applications. We are developing a cloud where our software would be available.
More secure and more efficient way of doing things. Cloud computing offers that potential. New approaches to IT automation and the ability to rapidly scale computing resources offer IT organizations the promise to swiftly respond to the demands of users in a new, cost-effective manner.
And the way that this would work is that we have the software we've developed. We are developing the hardware so these searches could be conducted in fractions of a second. Right now we have it up to the point where you could take a DNA profile, run it against the national DNA database in the United States that has about 10 million individuals on it, get familial search results within a fraction of a second. We would like to make that available in a secure cloud setting so people do not have to go out and buy this software. So anybody that would have access to the cloud, they'd have their own secure access, go in, they would export the information from their database, and by the way, none of that has any identifying information at all. It's purely the types and numbers. They'd go up, they'd run the familial search on the with their database and that profile. They'd draw it all back down, and they'd close up their section of the cloud. That's hopefully something that we'll have online soon and make it available to anybody that has a DNA database. Wouldn't have to be in the United States. It could be anywhere where you have a DNA database, and we're in the process of developing that with the National Institute of Justice and the National Forensic Science Training Center down in Tampa, Florida. This really is not a science issue. Scientifically, this can be done. Pete Marone is the director of the Department of Forensic Science in Virginia. They were able to put together their familial search policy and program within 3 months, but it purely is a policy issue. States that want to do familial searching, they do not need to change their statute. The attorney generals of different states should be advising their state labs that their statutes allow familial searching, and they should be able to then put together a policy that is legal and constitutional, protects people's privacy, and allows to do familial searching on these very serious cases. The only state in the United States that prohibits familial searching at this time is the state of Maryland. So the only statutory change that would be required anywhere in the United States to formulate a familial search policy would be in that state. It's my understanding that right now there is a group that is actively trying to get Maryland to change their statute. It's interesting, by the way, that the East Coast rapist who I talked about, who they have captured through other means, actually has a brother in the Maryland DNA database. I can't say that if they would have used familial searching and the familial search software that he would have come up. He may not have, but it's interesting. They may very well been able to prevent some of those sexual assaults from the East Coast rapists had they conducted familial searching in the Maryland database. That's all I have, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mitch. We do have a few questions. One is why the 13 loci? Is that equal to a 50% match? If you can talk about that, that would be great.
Well, we didn't want to engage in any with any profiles lower than 13. 13 in our state is a full DNA profile. We can upload smaller profiles. I think the limit is 9. But the problem that you have is when you start to get into mixture interpretation and familial searching, you know, we just didn't want to mix those two concepts together. So you have to have a full DNA profile. A full profile is 13 in Colorado. I know some states like California have increased theirs to 15. But we wanted a complete profile to conduct familial searching. We just didn't want to, we wanted to have good likelihood ratios, and we're concerned that if we started to use smaller partial profiles, there would be a problem there.
Okay, great. Why do you require Y-Str tests? Couldn't the individual have the same mother but different fathers?
Well, it depends on what your software is telling you. Obviously, we know through STR testing the sex of the individual that left the DNA at the crime scene. What our software does is tells you there's a likelihood that you have the father of that individual in the database or the brother of that individual in the database. So that's why you use the Y-Str testing. If the software is telling you have the mother, then you can't use Y-Str testing because if it's a male profile at the crime scene, the Y-Str is inherited from the father, not from the mother. You would have to do mitochondrial testing if there was a female involved. So most of these crimes are perpetrated by males. They're rapes, they're rape murders, they're sexual assaults on children. So most of the ones that I'm aware of, at least in the United States, have all been males so far. We don't have, but you can do the same thing if it's a female profile from the crime scene and it matches a male. You can use mitochondrial testing. But we use Y-Str testing, one, because it's available in our lab, and two, because the majority of the cases that we've gotten so far, all of them, have involved just males.
Okay, thank you. We have one more about a specific case. The question is, I have a 2004 homicide. I believe the victim's boyfriend committed the crime. She has a son with him, and so if the son gave a sample, would that, would it be useful to use this sort of technique in this case?
Well, I would have to ask some questions. Obviously, it would be important to know if, through their investigation, they've been able to get a DNA profile from the person they believe that did it. Obviously, if they've gotten a DNA profile from the boyfriend and it doesn't match, then that would end him being a suspect. But there was a case out in Nevada where that's exactly what they did. They had a DNA profile of a murderer. They were able to get the sons of who they believed was the murderer's profile, and through a reverse paternity test with DNA from the mother and the son, they were able to get enough information to get a warrant to obtain the profile from the father, which matched the kidnapping murder that they had. So you wouldn't need a familial software for that. You know, in the Lonnie Franklin case, the Los Angeles Police Department, they followed Mr. Franklin around. They went into a pizza restaurant. When he got up and left, they busted the table. They collected the utensils and the pizza crust from where he was seated, and that's how they got their DNA profile. So it may make some sense to actually try to get the profile of the boyfriend through other means. Certainly if he owes the state a profile, he's on a sex registry, he's, you know, for some reason they haven't taken a sample, that would be a good way to get it too. But really, for that kind of situation, you wouldn't need to use a familial software.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have one more question. How would you initiate a request, and what format should we follow to have a search performed? Where do you start?
Well, you have to have it done at your state level. So how this starts is that whoever runs your state database basically has to agree to use our software. The cloud situation I talked about is not readily available at this point, but we will give our software to a state that has a database. We gave it to Virginia. We're about to give it to Wisconsin, probably Oklahoma next. The best way to initiate that contact is to email me at mrm@denverda.org, or go to our website, which is again denverda.org, and go to the DNA resource section and click on my email, which if you scroll down, you'll be able to find my email. You can also reach out to the director of the Denver Police Crime Lab. Greg LeBurge, and his email is there as well. What we will do then is make arrangements to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we will deliver the software to the state lab or to whatever entity it is that has the DNA database. Obviously, like I said, 85% of CODIS hits happen at the state level, so we've been primarily dealing with state labs, although we did offer the software to the Philadelphia City Police Lab when they were looking for the Kensington Strangler. We had started negotiations with them to give them the software, and they caught the Kensington Strangler, and so there was no follow-up. But if you have a good-sized local database, or if you have access to the state database, that's where you're going to get the most effective results from familial searching.
Great, thank you so much. Do you want to share any closing comments, Mitch?
You know, I think it's really important that those of you that are in law enforcement, those of you that have crime labs, that you understand this is a technology that really can help in the situation where a community is terrorized by a serial murderer or a serial rapist. Obviously, in the situation with Mr. Franklin, that kind of terror went on in South Central Los Angeles for nearly 25 years. And that terrorizes women, that terrorizes people that have daughters and families that deserve answers. And we are offering this software for free. We know that state governments in the United States don't have a lot of resources to devote to this. And that's why we're offering it for free. And it astonishes me that not more states have not taken us up on our offer to use this software. Obviously, they can go out and buy the software, really don't care if they buy it or get it from us for free, but I think it's very important in those cases where you've got a DNA profile that doesn't match anybody in the database, that you give your law enforcement agencies a lead, an investigative lead that is based on science, based on biology, statistics, and genetics. And that's what this lead is about. And make sure that they do it in a way that protects people's privacy and doesn't violate anybody's rights. And I just want to thank everybody for listening. If anybody has any follow-up, obviously just email me at mrm@denverda.org.
Great, Mitch. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this issue. You really are the leading expert in this area, and appreciate definitely your time today. I know it's you have a very busy schedule. And I want to remind everybody to visit our website to learn about our other webinars, future webinars, and trainings. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon. If we didn't get to your questions, you can definitely email Mitch or email me, and we'll get your question to the right person. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great afternoon.